Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale. Listen, Shane, it's not a winning football week. Well, it hasn't been for a while, but it is a winning week in that we have basketball back, men's and women's, and there is a lot of good news to share there. So a lot to discuss on this program. We'll talk some football. We're going to have ace reporter Bruce Pascoe of the Arizona Daily Star join us in the second segment to talk basketball. And in the final segment, we will make picks for football and talk a little women's basketball. You are only 6 games behind me now. You are, even though we tied last week, you're getting closer.
You hear those footsteps, Eric? You hear them?
No, I don't. No,
they're still a little further away. I know.
But we also have a new sponsor of the program that you'll tell us about in the final segment of the show. So let's get right to it. It is time for Buy or Sell, which is presented by Ice Shaker. Every week we show you the cool different, ice shakers that Shane and I get. I have the half-gallon jug inspired by Rob Gronkowski. If you're watching on the video, not doing a great job with my video there. Shane has the one that we usually
mine's
have.
Back, and the other one's back here, right back here too. So,
but you can go to iceshaker.com, use promo code Wildcat Country, capital W, capital C, and get $5 off. And trust me, you want one of these things. They are absolutely amazing. And these are not just wall decorations like you see that Shane and I have.
If you train like a Gronk, you're going to want one of these because this is why they have them. Because Rob Gronkowski told his brother Chris, who runs the Ice Shaker, who founded Ice Shaker, dude, I need a bigger bottle for my workouts. And Chris says, I'll get right on it. And so he sent us a couple of these. And so, you train like a Gronk, you're going to need one of those.
And these things are heavy, Shane. Like these things are like a legit, at least a pound, right? Like they're no joke.
And our logo looks so good on those, doesn't it? I mean, I got giddy when I opened it. I really did.
I did too. I thought it was very cool. All right. Number one in Buy or Sell. Shane, after what we're seeing lately with 4 straight losses, Arizona should not be favored against ASU in the Territorial Cup here in a couple weeks. Buy or sell?
Well, you're already thinking ahead to that one. You're thinking the 6 straight losses, or what would it be? 7 straight losses going into that game?
It would be, I think it would be 6 straight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to, as of now, I'll sell it. I actually think, and I made a reckless prediction after last year's Territorial Cup game that Arizona would be favored for the 2022 game. But as of now, I still feel pretty good about that because Arizona's not a very good team still, especially on defense. ASU's not that much better. You could argue they're not better at all. And the game will be in Tucson, where Arizona will have a true home field advantage for the first time in 4 years. Let's not forget, even though we'd like to forget what happened 2 years ago, there were no fans at Arizona Stadium. So I think it's a pretty even matchup. And there was a stat, Pick Six Previews puts out these stats, the best offenses, best defenses based on different metrics they use. There was one in particular, and I don't remember off the top of my head, but there was one just like adjusted defensive efficiency among all Power 5 schools. One category, Arizona was last. Arizona State was second to last.
Oh, wow. Oh, great.
So if you're thinking ahead to that game, you're thinking already maybe take the over, even though I wouldn't gamble on that game to save my life. But as of now, health permitting, and I think we're going to talk about that as well, I think Arizona might be a slight favorite for that game because I think they're pretty evenly matched, certainly more so than they have been in the last several years. And the game is in Tucson, which, Arizona's won at least a couple games they've won 2 games at home this year. So, yeah,
I'm going to buy that I'm going to buy that it should be a pick 'em as of right now.
You're hedging. Come on.
Well, listen, I still think Arizona's going to win the game, but here's why I'm concerned. And I've darn near guaranteed a win over the last year, Shane. You know that. We've talked about this ad nauseum. I just, right now, with Sean Aguano coaching for potentially his job, and keeping that ASU job full time, if they beat U of A, I'm telling you, I don't know that ASU can get rid of Aguano.
You really think Aguano's in line for the full-time job?
I really do. Yes.
It'd be interesting, wouldn't it?
And I think if they beat Arizona, I think he has a real good shot at getting it.
You think that would make that big a difference? I mean, Herm went 4-0 against Arizona, and he got canned anyway.
I just think Aguano, if he can motivate this team with using, it is, Bourget even have a scholarship at this point? I think so. But he was not a heralded prospect, unlike his brother, who's at, I think, Western Michigan or one of those schools.
And his brother, who we had on, was an Arizona commit before under Kevin Sumlin. And obviously that changed when Sumlin was fired.
But the offense has been a lot better under Aguano. And I listen, as an Arizona fan, I hope ASU does hire him, because I don't think the ceiling is there long-term for him at ASU. With that said, I'm getting a little concerned as of now, considering Arizona probably isn't winning this week, and against Washington State, who looked great last week, may not be a W either. You'd have a 6-game losing streak. Yeah, I'd be concerned about that, and I would put it as a pick 'em. But
the last thing I'll say about that game is that the cliches, all bets are off. You can throw out the records when they play. That only applies when both teams are reasonably equally talented, where one could reasonably upset the other. That hasn't been the case the last couple of years. Arizona's just been that bad. Now we're in a universe where Arizona is comparable to ASU again.
Yes.
So then you get into the realm of unpredictable things happen. Even in the 80s when Arizona beat ASU over and over, and then what we call the streak, Arizona wasn't as good as ASU was on paper most of those years, but they were still a good team. When they beat ASU, the Rose Bowl team in 86, Arizona was also a ranked team. So that's the difference. Arizona is now in range of beating ASU, whether it's going to be an upset or whether they're the favorites. So in that respect, I think we're now back to the old. I think those cliches apply again, is what I'm trying to say, is that we're in that range where either team could win for any number of stupid reasons, any kind of crazy plays, crazy special teams plays, which always take place in this game. So I think we're back in that world. And that's a good place to be because Arizona hasn't been there in a while.
Number 2, Shane, Arizona got screwed by the schedule, and they would have been a bowl caliber team if not having to run through this gauntlet of the current number 6, number 8, number 12, number 13, and number 25 teams in a row, which Arizona has now faced with number 12 UCLA up this week. I mean, it's been brutal. So I'm saying buy or sell, Arizona would have been a bowl caliber team if they hadn't been hosed by the schedule makers. Buy or sell.
So you're saying that they hadn't had all these games consecutively?
And if maybe one or two of them were changed out for a Stanford or maybe an Oregon State.
Well, then sure, possibly. Yeah, I'll buy that they could have another win and they could possibly be, 2 wins away from getting to a bowl game as opposed to 3. Sure. But I think their record reflects about where they are. And I think that it's kind of a rare situation, Eric, in my opinion, because Arizona's about where we thought they would be, because rarely does that happen. Rarely do things work out the way that we thought. I thought that there might be an upset in there for Arizona in this 5-game gauntlet, and there hasn't been. They have one more chance on Saturday, but that's played out like we thought maybe it would on paper.
Yep.
Yeah, I understand your point. I mean, I don't say they got screwed by the schedule, but I understand
they did. It's
a luck of the draw, Eric. They happened to not get Stanford and. Well, what's the other team?
Oregon State.
Oregon State. Yeah.
Well, Oregon State's a good team. Good. Yeah. I mean, Stanford's bad. Stanford's one of the worst teams in the conference. I mean, Arizona probably that against Cal. That's a team they probably should have beaten at home. But yeah, Shane, they got hosed. With that said, I'm selling that. Arizona's defense sucks. And I sorry to say their offense is bowl caliber. Their defense definitely is not. Doesn't matter who they played. Finding 6 wins with this caliber of a defense. In their last 4 games against this gauntlet, Shane, they've given up 49, 49, 45, and 45 points.
They're consistent, Eric.
They are. So, I mean, it makes it easy to do math saying they're giving up 47 points a game. Shane, this defense is a disaster.
Agreed.
And it's probably not going to get better against UCLA this weekend. We'll make picks. But I have a special bet that you want to put your money on, and it's not like some of the others that I've given out in the last month. I will say that. So we'll save that to the end of the program.
I will throw in one more thing, Eric. The only game I really think that Arizona should have won that they lost this year was the Cal game. It's the game they should have won, and they just looked awful in the second half. They turned the ball over, and that's the game where really the defense just completely collapsed. The non-conference schedule, we thought they got some pieces to work with. They're getting some turnovers. They're getting some sacks. Conference play has been completely different. Cal's not bad, but they're not good either. And Arizona should have won that game.
Correct. Number 3, San Diego State to the Pac-12. Buy or sell?
I'll
Pac-10.
I'll buy it in that they could do worse. Now, in terms of football and men's basketball, San Diego State's got a decent combination. It's not the most exciting. San Diego's an okay market. They're not great, but I guess it's a matter of would you rather that or them join the Big 12? I know where you stand. I think I'd be okay in that scenario. I'd like them to add a 12th team. I don't know they necessarily have to. Someone noted that now that it's one big conference again, there's not two divisions for football. You don't necessarily have to add a 12th team. It'd be a little weird if there were an odd number of teams. Obviously, one team would have to be on a bye every week, kind of like they do in the CFL, the Canadian Football League, where there's 9 teams. One team has to be on a bye every week. But I'd be fine with it. It's obviously, you're just adding one team, but it's still a drop off from UCLA and USC in terms of exposure, in terms of the quality of football, and maybe men's basketball too. And it's not the natural rivalry. It's not bad. I could live with it.
Okay, I'm going to buy this conditionally. If this happens, I want to see Gonzaga in basketball for sure, and I wouldn't mind seeing a Boise State and or UNLV in football. If you're going to go for San Diego, you got to get Las Vegas, right? I mean, you play the championship game there anyways. You might as well have them in your. I know they're not great, but they bring you the Vegas market. Yeah, and Boise brings you a team that has won big bowl games in the last decade and a half. The blue turf would be interesting. I mean, you've already got the Oregon schools play them enough. Washington State. I wouldn't mind seeing Arizona. Not that I'm ever going up there to watch the game, to be honest with you.
As long as J.J. doesn't play for Boise State anymore.
Well, right. I forgot about that Fiesta Bowl. That's right. As far as I'm concerned, you can't just add them solo. So if you add them with somebody else, I'm okay with it. If you add them solo, no, I'm selling it. Then stick with 10.
That's fair.
What you have.
That's
okay. Fair. Number 4, the Big 12 isn't necessarily the better football and basketball conference, as Arizona believes by per our friend John Wall Street, Corey Leff. Thoughts on that the Big 12 isn't necessarily the better football basketball combined conference than what the Pac-10 has left by yourself.
Buy or sell that the Big 10 is not.
Big 12,
excuse me. Buy or sell the Big 12 is not. If you're throwing in basketball, I'm going to sell it because I think that men's basketball would be an upgrade. I think that Arizona, Kansas would be appointment television twice a year. And some of the other schools in that conference, even with Texas and Oklahoma leaving, I think that it wouldn't be a massive upgrade, but it would be an upgrade. I think Big 12 in football would be kind of a lateral move with Texas and Oklahoma leaving, maybe a slight upgrade too. Is it worth the upheaval? I don't know. And you did make a good point, Eric, and I have to note when you do make a good point. That Arizona, after ASU and maybe the UCLA, the SoCal schools don't have a lot of great natural intense rivals in the Pac-12. So would it be that big a deal if they left? Obviously ASU, we want to continue that. I want to continue that rivalry personally. But after that, Oregon's become a bit of a rivalry, especially in men's basketball. Is it that big? I don't know. I think long story short, to revisit my original point, if you're throwing in men's basketball, I would say Big 12 would be a bit of an upgrade, but I think it's marginal.
Do I even need to elaborate for as often as I've banged this drum over the last few months? Sell. I think the Big 12 is better. I think Arizona is overestimating the Pac-12. Now, with that said, if they can get a better TV deal with an ESPN plus an Amazon or whatnot,
and that's all it comes down to. Yeah.
If you get more money, which then helps the school, I guess there's nothing more that I can say. But Gonzaga is huge for basketball. You add Gonzaga for basketball, we're all paying attention now. Now you have the nation's attention because Gonzaga is that big. Yeah. San Diego State doesn't really move the needle on its own. Next one, Shane, last one before we go to Bruce Pascoe. Watching the basketball game the other night, I was more concerned with what I saw than overjoyed with Arizona scoring 117 just because of the turnovers. Buy or sell the concern that I had in watching this team play.
I'll buy the concern with the turnovers. Sure. It's so early with this team. And we have to remember not going to have Courtney Ramey for the next 2 games as well. They didn't have him for the Nicholls State game. He's suspended for participating in some sort of unsanctioned draft thing. I don't know. But it's really hard to tell just how good this team is through one game. But yeah, the turnovers, that they were a concern last year, they're a concern this year. One question I'm going to ask Bruce Pascoe is, I wonder if Arizona's turnover rate just sort of comes with the territory of Tommy Lloyd's offense. And it's free flowing. It's run and gun. You're going to have some of those turnovers as part of the mix. It's really hard to cut those out. I'm sure Tommy Lloyd would like to see them reduced. I would like to see them reduced. I think, 24 game ain't going to cut it. Obviously, you'd
No.
want to see maybe 15. I think would be the baseline. You want to keep it under that, and in most games, I think it'll be closer to that. But yeah, the turnovers are a concern. But I think that, and again, you don't want to overreact because I feel like this is like overreacting to an NFL preseason game in a way. But I think that the depth on this team is going to be there. Whether the star power is there or not is still that's still out for discussion. Losing 3 guys to the NBA and Justin Kier. Guys who can lead the team, who can take over late in the game. But I think that the depth is good. I think that Arizona added enough pieces between the incoming freshmen, the transfers, the guys overseas, to really have another solid 8 or 9 men roster. Whether that's going to be resulting in number 2 team in the country or not, we'll see. We got a long way to go, and we'll know more over the next couple of weeks. But I'll buy a bit of your concern, but I don't think it's anything that can't be corrected at this point.
I'm selling my own concern after your explanation. That's a very good point that you make. And now let's find out more from Bruce Pascoe to see if he's concerned about what he saw here on Wildcat Country. Scooby, we sent you an ice shaker. They are a sponsor, courtesy of our buddy Chris Gronkowski. You have it right there.
I love my ice shaker. Fun fact, when I trained with Glenn Gronkowski, everybody, when we were trained together, people thought I was the other Gronk brother. So it's kind of funny. But yes, I love my ice shaker. It is very good. I use it every day. I am a veteran to the ice shaker game, by the way.
What's up, Wildcat Country? Chris Gronkowski here. Use coupon code Wildcat Country at iceshaker.com.
We are very pleased, Shane, to bring back our friend Bruce Pascoe, who is the ace basketball reporter for the Arizona Daily Star. We haven't had him on, lately because there hasn't been basketball until recently, but it's back as of Monday, and we are very glad to have Bruce back. All right, Bruce, I'm throwing you on the spot. First question, it's been a while, so thanks for joining us. Cousin Sal, who's a famous sports gambler, TV personality, his best bet in college basketball this year is Arizona to win the national championship at 22-1.
Oh no.
Is that a good bet in your opinion? Or are those odds way too low?
They never give you great value on those futures. There's always a lot of house edge in there. I know. Having lived in Las Vegas, I don't know. I just followed that, and I usually stayed away from futures just because you for that reason, you never really get good value. So I don't know. I think 22-1 sounds fair. It's a long shot bet, but and they've got a lot to do, but it could happen. They've got a lot of guys that could come. This is a team kind of like last year that could really come together and be something by the end of the year. So, it seems like a reasonable thing, to me.
Like Eric said, Bruce, thanks again for joining us. We appreciate it. We've been looking forward to it. Before we get into the one game that the men's basketball team has played so far, let's talk about the preseason predictions. Arizona picked to finish second in the Pac-12 in the media poll. Where did you have Arizona and why?
Oh, I had them second too. I think UCLA just has too much back, and really, adding a couple 5 stars with Amari Bailey and Dembono if he can play. And then, Jaime Yaquez and Tiger Campbell, too. They're both, player of the year candidates. And, they may not win it, but you got to go with them, I think, just because they have so much on paper. And Arizona, has a lot, but lost 3 guys in the NBA. And that's pretty significant, even with the guys they're bringing in. So, if you just look at it on paper, I think that probably explains why most of us went with UCLA first. And then Oregon, could be pretty close behind Arizona, depending on how they gel. We don't know. Based on what happened last year, it can go either way.
So we've seen Arizona in 2 games so far, 1 exhibition game and then the Nicholls game where they set some school records, also turned it over a lot like last season, really. Your initial thoughts on this team? Obviously, we didn't get to see Courtney Ramey. We won't see him for the next couple of games as well for his suspension, but your initial thoughts on this team?
Well, just a couple of things. I think that the big thing, and this kind of shown in the red-blue game as well, just the big guys. It's funny because they lost Christian Coloco, and you thought, oh, okay, what's going to happen now? Is Ballo going to be ready, and this and that? And all of a sudden now they've got Ballo looks like a different player. Even as good as he was finishing last year, he looks even better than that, and he's in pretty good shape for his size and he's experienced. It's starting to really click for him. And then you got, Tubelis is a returning all-conference player. There's not many of those guys. They usually leave for the pros. He's back. And Henry Basar from Estonia, who, under the radar, there was a lot of talk about him, and he looks like he can really really help him, especially as he learns the U.S. college game. He's got some real mobility for his size. And then Dylan Anderson, another big guy. I mean, who may not help him that much right away, but certainly has potential down the road. So that struck me. And then the other thing that struck me is this team still plans to run just as much with those guys and having that emphasis with those inside guys. And, we saw that the other night when Nicholls State tried to come out and basically run and be aggressive, and that doesn't work when you're out talented that much like they were. And it was just a free for all for Arizona. I mean, 117 points, against anybody. That's something else.
With the turnovers, Bruce, do you think that's just kind of the nature of the way Tommy Lloyd likes to play? It's kind of more free flowing. It's looser, giving guys an opportunity to kind of just, I don't know, maybe freelance a little bit, and just the turnovers are going to come in that situation? Or is that something that you think actually could be improved from the beginning of the season? Obviously, we don't hope for 24 a night, but it could be improved over the course of the season.
Yeah, I mean, well, that is one thing. I think you're right, Shane. It's very style of play has a lot to do with it. Big guys touch the ball a lot with Tommy Lloyd's system, and naturally they're probably going to have a little more turnover issues. And I think and it's early in the season too. You've got freshman big guys out there. You got freshmen all over the court. Actually, this is going to take them a while to key into it. But the interesting thing is, even with 24, if you considered it with the pace of the game and the number of possessions, the turnover percentage was actually very comparable to the turnover percentage last year. It was 27.4 something % of their possessions end in a turnover, and that's pretty much what happened against Nicholls. So I don't think there's too much of an alarm there. Certainly, if this were Pac-12 play and a lower possession game and they gave up 20 plus, you would be concerned. But I think they should improve on that.
Bruce, the one thing that struck me as most interesting outside of the turnovers the other night was the amount of minutes Kylan Boswell played. 23. He had 8 points, 5 assists. This was a guy that I thought we weren't going to see potentially all year. Then it was January. Now he's getting the fourth most minutes on the team, first game of the year. What are you expecting out of him?
Well, I mean, that was definitely ahead of schedule. I could see him doing that that's the kind of thing I expect him to do maybe in January. But what happened is, without Ramey being suspended, and then Kirk Risa picked up 3 fouls in the first half, and they had to lean on him heavily. I think he played 12 or 13, maybe 14 minutes in the first half alone. And they say, so Tommy Lloyd really had to go with him. I think that was not part of the plan. They've been trying to ease him in on things. He's cleared to play fully with his broken foot from last spring, but they weren't going to rely on him that heavily. Just so it happens they had to throw him in there, and maybe in the long run it might be a good thing for them to have him get those kind of experiences. And inevitably in these next couple of games, when Ramey's also going to be suspended, it might be good for Arizona to give him put his feet in there a little bit and get him wet, because he's still only 17 years old. He's supposed to be at Compass Prep High School right now. He might be the youngest player in Division I this year. Nobody has that stat right now, but he's very talented but very young, and then on top of that, didn't have basically the entire postseason to work out because of his foot. So just like, if they can get anything from him like they did Monday, that says something.
In a few years, when we look back on this team and I ask you, Bruce, who is the most talented player on the 2022-23 Arizona Wildcats team? Project into the future. Who is that? Who is the most talented guy long-term on this roster?
Wow, that's a tough one. I mean, I think relative to size, and this is based on 3 appearances, but you might say Henry Basar. I mean, I think he's just got a really unusual skill set, and if he develops, he could be a pretty impressive NBA player. We'll see. I mean, but I think obviously Zoo Tubelis is a heck of a player. He's an unbelievable college player, and whether or not it translates into the pros, maybe it does. Maybe he finds a way to get there, but he's unbelievable as well. But if you mean as far as NBA talent, I guess that's why I was saying the other. But I think and Boswell will be interesting to keep an eye on too. I mean, he was a 5-star player in the class of 23, and then jumped out of that and decided to jump into college. But by the end of his sophomore year, He could be an all conference type player from what we've seen of him, just the way he plays and can shoot pretty well, passes well. He's got potential to be a really solid defender, just a lot of things like that. But, up and down, there's a lot of guys. I mean, you're looking at Adama Ball could come out. Pelle Larsson maybe doesn't strike you necessarily as the super talented guy, but he's super versatile and strong and smart, plays, he does a lot of things. He could find a way into the league. I mean, there's a lot of possibility with this team.
Yeah, let me ask you a little bit more about Tabellis, Bruce, because he was been one of the best players on the team each of his first 2 years, and then he didn't really show up in the NCAA tournament the way that fans obviously expected. Do you think he comes to me with a bit of a chip on his shoulder after that performance in the tournament? And do you think he could be a guy who maybe does get to close to 20 points a game like he did against Nicholls State?
Yeah, that's been one of the big talk in the preseason is about that. Tommy Lloyd's been not shy about talking about that, how I think they kind of talked a lot about it after those last 2 games, and it's set with both of them. Here's a guy who had first team all conference season and then basically just disappeared against Houston, and that if that was almost a microcosm of what went wrong in that game. It's like what happened to Tabellis, and he took it hard, and I think he's worked a lot. He's appears to be in even better shape and better motivated. If anything, there was the exhibition game against Western Oregon. Tommy Lloyd faulted him for being too aggressive and going after steals and trying to make things happen, where he likes to get the ball at the top of the key if he can and take it down for a dunk. And he can get into trouble if he tries too hard to force those kind of things. And but that's good to see that sign for Arizona that he is aggressive. And I think inside he knows he has to be a little tougher. He said something to me about like that he watched the tapes and didn't think like he ever rebounded last year. Well, he did rebound quite a bit, but I think he knows he can do a lot better there. And so that's going to be real key. And that's a good thing to have a guy like that, motivated like that, when he is an all conference player, because he's coming in still pretty hungry, I think. And he knows he's going to be, he's going to be a guy that needs to carry them game in and game out.
Let me ask you about Kerr Kriisa. He had a good performance, even though, like you said, he had foul trouble in the game against Nicholls, but he's a guy who can definitely rub some people the wrong way. His teammates seem to love him. How do you think his new teammates are reacting to him? You think the team is kind of as cohesive as it was last season in that regard?
Well, it's still developing, but it's interesting. I think so. I mean, I think even though he's like that, I think personally, I think they like him. I mean, Courtney Ramey, of all people, talked about basically Kerr Kriisa was like his top recruiter last spring. I mean, Ramey was describing how he was working out for the NBA draft in Las Vegas at the time, and he'd check his phone, and Kerr Kriisa is pinging him all the time saying, come play with us, come play with me, or whatever. I don't know, exactly what he said, but, building a relationship. And I think he's, he knows he's like this with his Estonian national team too. He's he's got some leadership in him. He knows he has to build relationships. I think he's wise to that. He's a smart guy. And, I think a little bit of what he does is kind of shtick, as far as the way he is. But I also think that he likes it because he's naturally that way. And I think Tommy Lloyd embraces it to some extent, just because he likes to have a little swagger on this team. And a lot of the other guys on the team, are confident and aggressive, good players, but don't, they're most of them keep to themselves a little more than he does. I guess You'd say to be maybe that's an understatement, but so he kind of brings a little difference to them. But it will be interesting to see how it plays out, because it is a different team and different guys. They don't have Dale and Terry kind of being a showman out there, or Matherin being a machine, and and Koloko inside. So he's going to need to take an even bigger role that way, and it remains to be seen exactly how it's going to play out.
Is this the deepest team, Bruce, that you can remember at Arizona in quite a while? Well, just in terms of available pieces that could be used,
Yeah, that's a good question, Eric. I think, it's certainly up there. I mean, it's interesting too, because they've only got 12 guys, and then that counts, Tubelis, who really is, isn't part of the rotation. And then they got a couple other guys, with Philip Vorvicinen and Dylan Anderson, are kind of maybe a little more developmental. They might help out. So when you get down to it, they've only got 8 or 9 guys. But all of them are solid. And, I think that goes down to, even Cedric Henderson, the, low major transfer they got in. He can definitely play on this level. He can do a lot of things for them. And yeah, obviously they're deep up front. They're deep on the wings. They got a couple with Colin Boswell getting healthy. They're they've got 3 options at point guard. When Ramey comes back, I think maybe the only area where they're a little bit shallow in is just if they need to go small, who plays that 4 in a smaller lineup, and it's probably going to be, a Sed Henderson or Pelle Larsson. Like Larsson had to play a lot last season, because there are those times, you guys have seen it, where sometimes you get those 6'5", 6'6" power forwards at Oregon or someplace around the league, and that's hard on Azuolas Tubelis if he's out there trying to guard him. So they need kind of that hybrid guy too.
What do you make of Adama Ball? I know you referenced him earlier in a question with Shane, but I mean, he comes off the bench, scores 14 the other night. I mean, like electric. This guy can light it up. We saw that a little bit in the Pac-12 tournament last year when Kriisa was hurt. Yeah. What are your expectations for him this season?
Yeah, I think he should be the top wing off the bench probably. I mean, not counting Sed Henderson, who is more of a combo forward. I mean, a little difference there, but not really. But he showed it. Yeah, he showed it a little bit last season, especially late. Tommy Lloyd made some jokes about trying to hide him in the bullpen because he wasn't, or in AAA or whatever, like he wasn't quite ready to bring him out. Then brought him out, and then when Kriisa went down, he did an extra body in there, and he hit. I remember hit a couple of key shots, I think, against UCLA even. And then the other night, he's got a little confidence about him, and he might be, as good as any threat from 3 as they have. We'll see how that develops, but he should definitely be a guy in there who can do that. I think it helped him too that he had a pretty good summer playing for France's under-20 team. The only bad part about that from Tommy Lloyd's perspective is he wasn't here in Tucson to work as much with the guys here. And Lloyd said something the other day that, they were really working on re-engineering his shot as much as they could, but they didn't have him all summer. But so far, so good. So, it does appear that he can be, he's more confident, and he's a good shooter, and kind of like Boswell. He was a really young freshman last year, so he's basically, you could say he's almost kind of a freshman now, and upside is definitely there with him.
Bruce, I mean, just from a journalist perspective, what are your thoughts on Tommy Lloyd a year into the job now, or I guess a little over a year since he's been hired? Just your thoughts on him, dealing with him, interacting with him versus Sean Miller, personality wise. What do you make of Tommy Lloyd?
Well, it's just, he's just you guys have seen it. Everybody's seen it. I mean, he's just he is what he is. I mean, the way he comes off, he's intense. He's dead serious about all this stuff, but he comes about it in a different way. And that goes to the way he treats players and the way he treats us. And I think the way he is with fans. I mean, he's a very approachable guy, and, he talks about a small town roots and, values or whatever. And he is that way. He's, he'll even say things, just like on a personal basis, and with, about how's your family or whatever. It's the kind of things that frankly you're kind of uncomfortable answering as a journalist, because you get used to guys like Miller where it's all business. And there's nothing wrong with Miller. He's, he did a lot of things well, and he didn't like talking about his personal life though at all. Right, exactly. Except unless it was like the Steelers or something about that. Right. But yeah, no, he was very, whereas with Tommy, anything goes. He's it's just it's a different thing. So it's I mean, it's just a lot different, and I think he's generally just a pretty nice guy, and it's not usually at that level of coaching. There's a lot of nice coaches out there, but it's just how do I say it? It's just sort of more, there's so much more going on and so much more to control, and a lot of times it becomes mostly about business, and it's just right. It's just different. So with Tommy, it's a little more. It just feels like it's a little more down to earth about everything. Last question for you, Bruce, and I think this is the last question I've had for you for each of our interviews in the last 2 years. But the IARP decision that's still out there. Do we know any more about when it's going to come down? And based on other decisions the IARP has made, do we have any better idea of what kind of sanctions Arizona might get? Yeah, I think that's always an easy thing to forget about, because it's not something people over at U of A really talk about publicly. I try and write about it whenever I can. I wrote something last week when they announced about Louisville. Hey, it's coming. It's definitely coming. I mean, I think the IRP I don't know for the depth of people following the situation, but the IRP is basically being disbanded because they got a lot of criticism for taking too long. So they had 6 cases in there. They now spit out 3 of them. And Memphis and Louisville just recently after they were disbanded. And so once they finish these other 3, that'll be it. So I think they're, finally, it seems like kind of in a hurry to get this done. So I think for Arizona, it could be sometime this month or maybe next month from what I'm hearing. But then again, I've also heard things that, it's always later and later. I heard last spring, I heard it was going to be in September and it wasn't. So, but I do think it'll happen sometime early in the season. And, but I think with this precedence that the IRP has set, that, Arizona's case is a little different and a little more involved with everyone with the amount of charges than except for maybe Kansas. But it appears the IRP has made it clear that they do not want to penalize current players. And, so everything they've done has been everything else. So I don't think, and this is not what I thought a year ago, but I do think that the way they're going indicates that they're not going to give Arizona another postseason ban. They'll probably take a scholarship or 2 away. They'll probably make them take a lot of games out of the record books if they agree with the findings that players were ineligible. This and that. I think that the main difference to me is whether, Arizona does have one of the level 1s is regarding academic misconduct. And that's different than any of these other cases. And how do they look on that? And, and they also have some aggravating factors that they cited from the administration U of A, a couple of which people are still there. And what do they do about that? So it's a couple little things, but as far as the team, I think they're going to just do a lot of stuff except let the team play. I think that's probably, if I had to guess, that's what will come down.
Real quick follow-up. Sorry, Eric, real quick follow-up. Could Sean Miller possibly still face a suspension at Xavier for what happened to Arizona? Okay. Yeah,
absolutely. It does follow you, and I think, if he has a level 1 for lack of control, basically. He wasn't named, as everybody knows, who's been following, he was not named directly and doing anything, but it was, enough stuff going on, and they've said plausible deniability.
Right.
It's not an excuse anymore. We'll see if the IRP agrees with that. He might get nothing. And maybe but under the lack of plausible deniability with the head coach control, if he got that, he could face probably I think up to a third of the season. So it could be up to 9-10 games, and that would fall on the Xavier. But again, they seem to be, and this has been so long now, it's possible that maybe he gets nothing or maybe just half of that. It's just, I've heard it might only be 3 or 4 games, but I think the max is, I believe, 10. And that's what I initially expected. But again, things are changing rapidly with the way these cases are being settled.
All right, Bruce, last one for you. We haven't asked you about this one yet because things have changed since we last had you on when it comes to conferences with UCLA and USC off to the Big Ten, easy for me to say, and the Big 12 now in play. If it was up to you and you were the one making the decision from a basketball perspective, was Arizona a better fit in the Big 12, or is Arizona a better fit in whatever is left of the Pac-10, or if they want to expand or whatnot?
Wow, that's a tough one, Eric, because, as far as basketball, you could argue that maybe you kind of tilted towards the Big 12 because that's a really, really good basketball conference. But as we all know, this realignment is not being driven by basketball. Mm-hmm. It's 0% being driven by basketball. And they're booking revenue, 85% football and 15% for men's basketball, most of these cases. So they're just, basketball's at the back seat of the bus here. And so in light of that, I would think football wise, probably the Pac-10, Pac-11, Pac-12, whatever it might be, would be a better bet. And I think it's not that big a difference though with basketball to go either way. And I think in general, more so than football, I don't think even conference affiliation really matters that much in basketball, as Gonzaga has proved. And, Xavier, when Sean Miller was there the first time, all kinds of times you see teams that can dominate those mid-major conferences and they're basically high major teams in low major conferences. So I don't think it matters that much. But from a basketball perspective, however, I say Big 12 right now looking at it, but what if they added Gonzaga as a basketball only and San Diego State as all sports? Then the Pac-12 could look, pretty impressive as a basketball conference with San Diego State and Gonzaga in there. So, I'm just saying, as it is right now, Big 12 sounds maybe a little more appealing.
I think that's a fair answer. Well, we always appreciate having you on. You give us, you're a straight shooter. You give us what's going on, and we're excited. This is an interesting team to follow, without that proven superstar like we had last year with, Matherin and Koloko and then Dalen Terry, who came on the scene. It's going to be a fun season, and I'm sure we will have you on again sooner than later. Thanks again, Bruce.
All right. Thanks for having me, guys.
If you're looking to add value to your sports cards, you've got to check out dtsportscards.com. They're an authorized dealer for PSA, which means you'll get great prices on your submissions if you go through them. And for just $2 a card, DT Sports Cards will take a close look at each card you submit and let you know whether it's worth grading. I just submitted some high-end hockey cards. They took a very close look, said they're good to go, and they all earned a PSA 10 grade, which tripled the value of each card. DT Sports Cards is located right here in Arizona. They provide quick, personalized service through email or direct messages. Find them online at dtsportscards.com and check them out on Instagram at dt_sportscards.
Want to thank Bruce Pascoe for joining us. Great intel. I mean, we covered so much, Shane. It was great for Bruce to go over things with us. All right, let's talk a little women's basketball. So something very exciting. There's good news and bad news. I'm going to start with the good news. The women's basketball class in 2023 is number 1 in the nation per ESPN.
Amazing.
They have, Brea Cunningham, Montana Dew, and Jada Williams. Williams is the 21st ranked player, Cunningham 14, and Dew is 8. This is the number 1 class in the country, Arizona women's basketball. Mind blown.
How often on the men's side or the women's side do you see a program just come from nowhere to do this? I mean, Arizona, and to be clear, Arizona women's basketball they weren't even mediocre. They were bad. They were the worst in the conference before Dia Barnes came. They've had some good moments in the past when Dia Barnes played for the team, when Joan Bonavicini was the coach. But for a long time, they've been the armpit of the Pac-12. They just have. And to see Dia Barnes lift this team up, I think the Final Four run helped a lot, obviously. Got a lot of national attention. To have not only one of the best recruiting classes in the country, but the best. And they have a great one this year as well, is remarkable. But I know that they got some bad news the other day as well. I know you're going to get into that.
Yeah, Lauren Ware. I didn't realize this, Shane, that Lauren Ware, who is one of their great interior players, out for the season with knee surgery. Yeah,
real unfortunate. I still think Arizona's going to be a very good team without her, but certainly losing some of that depth and some of that rebounding ability, that presence on the court that she offered is going to hurt. I still think Arizona. We talked about, should the women be ranked higher in their poll and the men should be in theirs? I would still put at this point the women a little bit higher, but certainly that hurts, and you're going to need more from the freshmen right away. But I think with the transfer they brought in as well, I think they're going to be fine. I think they're going to be competitive, and I still think they could be probably the second best team in the Pac-12 behind Stanford if everything goes right.
Women's soccer, Shane, they've had quite a season under Becca Moros.
Yeah. Well, they didn't make the NCAA tournament, and that wasn't a big surprise. They lost a close game to ASU, which I know Arizona had a long winning streak against ASU, and they lost a close one the other day. But they finished in the top half of the Pac-12. They were not predicted to do that. And just Becca Moros' second year, having a bit of a rebuilding job after Tony Amato left for Florida, done a heck of a job. And with Hope Heisey, their goaltender, announcing she's coming back next season, they could be very good as well. So they could be a tournament team as soon as Becca Morris's third year. And so congratulations to her and a great season. I know it was disappointing they didn't get into the tournament, but that tournament's definitely a possibility next year.
You would certainly hope so, considering, Heisey was fantastic and another year of growth under Moros. So good job. Many props to the girls, and wish them better luck next year. One thing I want to touch on before we get into football picks. ESPN is going to go the entire season without broadcasting an Arizona game, a football game. To me, this is mind-blowing and kind of upsetting. I know how some people feel about ESPN, screw them, Schleybaugh, everything, Joe Lunardi, you know how I feel about him. Mm-hmm. It's still kind of disappointing that this is the network that our conference wants to go with. And there's a team that didn't get an appearance on them. And it's not like Arizona's the worst team in the country or worst team in the conference either.
Yeah, yeah, it's a little unfortunate, although it's not like they haven't gotten some national exposure because they've been on Fox plenty of times and they haven't been buried on Pac-12 networks every week. So that's been a positive. So I don't know how big a deal it is. I mean, if games are on national TV outside of Pac-12 networks, obviously fans are going to find a way to find them. You know, like I have a Fubo now, and it's great just being able to see right there what games are on, regardless of what channel they're on. So it's disappointing and a little bit of disrespect, but at the same time, as long as people who subscribe to DirecTV are able to watch Arizona half the time at least, I guess that's a win in my book.
Arizona was on Pac-12 Network way too many times. No offense to anybody that works for Pac-12 Network, Yogi Roth, who's great and joined us a few weeks ago. I understand Blair Willis pointed this out to me on Twitter that, each team had to fulfill, or the Pac-12 Network had to have each team on a certain number of times. Just worked out that way with Arizona. But, when you have matchups against, 3-4 teams in the top 13, when you played them or top 15 when you played them, and none of them were on ESPN. Yeah, that's a problem.
Especially considering their start. They started off the season pretty strong. You think that maybe some of the networks ESPN would pick them up for one game. Hey, this could be a good matchup against a top 25 team. And obviously, what Arizona's done since then has sort of validated ESPN's decision, I guess. But yeah, a little surprising in hindsight.
Well, you got the CBS game right off the bat. So I guess that kind of made up for it that, you got CBS National right off the bat. Before we get into our picks segment, we have a new sponsor for our picks segment. You might have heard the commercial a little bit earlier, but Shane, tell us about our newest sponsor.
So we got DT Sports Cards. I've really gotten into card collecting again the last year and a half or so, Eric. Really, like a lot of people have during the pandemic, I dusted off my old sports cards. I've gotten into grading them. And so PSA is the head honcho when it comes to grading. And most of their cards are more valuable than you get them graded at any other company. And so DT Sports Cards, the guy who runs the show, he lives in the East Valley, is east of Phoenix. He's a licensed PSA dealer. So you can submit your cards through him, which I have. And he'll submit them in bulk. You get a discount that way. He'll also look at your cards for just $2 a card and say, I think this could get a good grade, or I think maybe you shouldn't spend your money on this card because I found a few flaws in it. And I've saved some money that way. I've made some money that way. I sent off some cards already and gotten some great results. So check them out if you're a card collector, dtsportscards.com. They're also going to be at the Chandler Gilbert Card Show on the Saturday after Thanksgiving if you want to submit right there. We'll have more information on that before that show.
Well, welcome DT Sports Cards. And now this is our weekly picks segment, which is brought to you by DT Sports Cards. I am 9 games over 500 on the year. Shane is 3 games under. That is only a 6-game difference. We both went 6-4 last week. And now we have another slate of 10 games, including Arizona last against the spread. So Shane, we'll start with a Friday night game. Colorado is at USC, and USC is giving 34 against the pathetic Buffs. Who you got?
USC. I think Oregon's kind of in the same situation that USC is in terms of wanting to impress the committee every single week. USC didn't have that loss to Georgia to erase the memory of, but yeah. And Colorado is just that bad. And Oregon covered a 30.5 point spread at Colorado last week. I think USC covers as well.
I'm going to go with Colorado here, Shane. I think USC is going to rest players at the end of the game. I don't think this game has anything to do with impressing teams or impressing the committee, because they have UCLA up next week and Notre Dame the week after, and then potentially the Pac-12 championship game. Keeping guys healthy is most important. Caleb Williams should play maybe 2.5 quarters. I think Colorado backdoors a cover here, so I will take them plus 34. One guy that has been great is Jaden Daniels in that awesome upset of Alabama last week for LSU. LSU has a chance to win the SEC West outright with a win and then an Ole Miss loss this week. They are -3 at Arkansas. Who you got?
It's hard to actually be easy to predict a letdown here, but Arkansas just hasn't looked very good since the beginning of the year. They're a little bit overhyped. So I think LSU finds a way to keep it going, even though I think that the post-Bama hangover is going to be real, but I think they'll find a way to beat Arkansas by more than 3 points.
So Arkansas lost at home to Liberty last week. I don't know much about Hugh Freeze's Liberty team, but that's not good. The line's kind of weird here. I mean, this is a rivalry game, but I still think it should probably be more than 3. It is a little fishy. I'm taking LSU and feel pretty confident in that. Alabama coming off their second loss of the year. They're done. We're not going to see them in the Final Four, thank God.
Fingers crossed.
Yet again. They are a 12-point favorite at 1-loss Ole Miss. I've gone back and forth on this one. I'm taking Alabama. I think this is going to be an offensive explosion. One of my favorite picks of the week in my Sportsline column. Check that out, sportsline.com. Shameless plug. I love the over here, and I think Alabama scores in the 40s. So I'm going Bama to cover the 12. How about you?
I just don't think Alabama's as good as they have been in previous years. They're still very good, but they could easily have 3 losses at this point. You can think back to the Texas game with Ole Miss being at home as well. I think Bama wins, but this will be an opportunity for me, hopefully, to close that gap with you, Eric, because I'm going to take Ole Miss to cover.
Georgia is giving 16.5 at Mississippi State. Mike Leach's team just doesn't seem built for some of these defensive teams. We saw what happened when they played Alabama the other week. So I'm taking Georgia to cover. I think Mississippi State is a good team. I just think Georgia is at another level. So I'm going with the Bulldogs.
Did you see Mike Leach folding up all the
Georgia
chairs?
Bulldogs.
Right.
Yeah, I did see that. That was great.
He folded up all the chairs because they didn't deserve to sit down after blowing another lead. But
that was epic. Yeah.
I think they're on the decline. Georgia's on the ascension. So yeah, to me, this is an easy decision. Georgia covers.
So next week is the Pac-12 week of reckoning with USC, UCLA, and Oregon, Utah. But now there's a big rivalry for the Ducks, who continue to just be super impressive. They are playing Washington, which is their geographical rival, one of them, and they are favored by 13.5 at home this week. I like the Ducks here, Shane. I think they are a team that, as you mentioned, I know Utah's coming in next week, and Utah has injury issues of their own, but I think Oregon definitely needs to be impressive to show that 49-3 loss to Georgia was an aberration. So I think the Ducks cover the 13.5 here, and I like the over 72.5.
Yeah, to me, this is an easy decision. If this was in Washington, I'd take the Huskies to cover. It's a home game. I think the Ducks win by 2 touchdowns. Even if it's a close game in the fourth quarter, Oregon's up 7. You could see Washington throw a pick 6, and Oregon gets a backdoor cover. So I think the Ducks cover one way or the other.
I think Oregon big 2 or 3 touchdowns. I'm saying. All right, this is my pick of the week, and I'm going to let you make the first pick here. Okay. Now think about the line. TCU is undefeated, Shane. They're number 4 in the country. They're at Texas, who's like just inside the top 25. Texas is a 7-point favorite. Who are you taking?
Yeah, it's tough because it's such an easy game to pick Texas. And I think TCU, they deserve their ranking, but I don't think they're a top 4 team. They've had to come from behind against several good but not great teams. So I could see Texas finally uprooting their success. Gosh, the line, though, is tricky. If this was a pick 'em, I'd go Texas. But I think I'm still going to go Texas, but okay. It's a tough line. It's a very interesting line. Like you said, I think Vegas is onto something. I think the Longhorns cover.
All right. So last week we saw a line like this that didn't make much sense on paper. And that was Georgia was favored by 8.5 over Tennessee. And you're like, well, Tennessee's number 1. What is this? This is a weird one. Somebody knows something. I'm going with the somebodies. Give me Texas to win by 2 touchdowns or more. I think this is the week TCU gets blown out. Texas's defense is good enough to blow them out.
It feels like it's coming. It feels like it's coming, doesn't it? Yeah.
It feels like this is like a 42-13 type game that they're due for one of those. So I love Texas here. One of my plays of the week. All right. Cal is going to Oregon State. This is kind of a line. I don't know what to make of this one, Shane. Oregon State is minus 13.5 at home against Cal. Cal played pretty well against USC last week on the road. They showed me something. I'm going to take Cal to cover. I don't really feel great about it, but I'll take Cal with the points. How about you?
I'll take Oregon State. I think they're kicking themselves over losing that game to Washington, which they probably should have won. And they're better. They're at least 2 touchdowns better than Cal at home. So I'm going to go with the Beavers.
Okay, Utah. We talked about them earlier. They play Oregon next week. Stanford is really, really bad. Lost by 38 last week at home to Washington State. Utah is giving 24 at home against Stanford. I think the Utes have an easy cover. I just don't think Stanford can score at this point.
Yeah, I'll agree. I think Utah I think it's going to be a close cover, but I think Utah finds a way to cover. They're getting healthier. And Rice Eccles is just a tough place to play. So I'll go with Utah.
Remember those injury issues that Arizona had last year? Stanford has them this year. I don't believe they have a scholarship running back healthy to play this week against Utah. That is not a good sign. A safety led them in rushes last week. That's not a good sign either.
Shades of Samaje Grant in 2016.
Yes, well, but Samaje Grant was a lot better than the safety who had like 11 carries for 23 yards. Wasn't so good. ASU's going on the road to Washington State. Are the Cougs looking ahead to their trip in Tucson? Because they're giving 7.5, Shane, against the Sun Devils.
Just 7.5. I think Washington State covers. So ASU's been better under Iguano, like you said. It's a tough, Pacific Northwest is a tough place to play this time of year too. So I think I'm a bit more of a believer in ASU than you are, and I'm sure a lot of Wildcat fans are. But I think Washington State covers.
I think Washington State covers as well. This line, I don't know what to do with it. I could see ASU keeping it close for a while, but the Cougs were so good last week, and it concerns me. I wouldn't mind seeing the ASU keep this one close for a while as long as they don't win. I mean, that's most important. But I think Washington State probably wins this game by 10 to 14 points, so I'll take them. Okay, finally, Arizona is going to the Rose Bowl, Shane. UCLA is ranked 12th in the country in the latest, committee rankings. There is a shot for them to get to the playoff. They need to win out, which would include wins likely over USC and Oregon. And then I think they would have a case as a one-loss team to make the playoff as Pac-12 champs. I'm going to take Arizona with the points, though. I don't know if Jacob Cowling's going to play. Right now, I'm going to assume that he's not. Mm-hmm. But I think Arizona's going to score a lot. I just think this game is a complete shootout. The over-under is a staggering 77.5, which is one of the largest that I've ever seen in college football. I think this is just absolute bombs away. It's an 8:30 game on Fox Sports 1. I mean, we're probably going to be up till 12:30. UCLA 51, Arizona 34. Wildcats cover, but give up a lot more. How about you?
I'm in the same boat as you, which really concerns me. But I was thinking the same thing. I think this could be a shootout. I think this could actually be a close game for a while. I think begrudgingly, I admit that Dorian Thompson-Robinson is a lot better than he was a few years ago. Remember, we saw him in that game when Grant Gunnell got a spot start for Khalil Tate in Arizona.
We did.
Won. Yep. Neither quarterback was good in that game, but Thompson-Robinson has really emerged. Arizona's defense with UCLA's offense, the way they've been playing, UCLA scores 50, but I think I agree with you. I think this could be a shootout. I think this could be a back and forth game. I'm not bold enough to pick Arizona to win it, even though before this 5-game gauntlet, I thought UCLA was their best chance at a win. But I'm going to pick Arizona. Let's say 1998 Territorial Cup game final score, 50-42 UCLA.
Wow. Good memory on that one. You've written 2 books about them, and we'll talk more about those in the coming weeks. But hey, I think we would all love to see it be a 1-possession game. I just hope it's exciting. It's a late game. We want to stay up. Don't make me go to bed early. We have the time change now. All I want to say is thank God this isn't a home game. At least I don't have to drive back from Tucson for one of those. But then we have 2 home games to close the year out, Washington State and ASU. So looking forward to that. But we're getting in full swing. We have a lot of games to talk about in the coming weeks. Men's basketball with the Maui Invitational, obviously the last couple games for the football team, women's basketball, and a lot more. If you have questions, comments, feedback of any kind, email us at catcountryaz@gmail.com or check us out on Twitter at catcountryaz. Want to thank Bruce Pascoe again for joining us. Great interview with him. For Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks for listening. And as always, bear down.